kung may natanggal by reason of resignation, removal, kakaroon ng vacancy. And how should the vacancies be filled? So vacancies may arise due to several reasons. Among them are removal, expiration of term, resignation, disqualification, death of a director, so forth and so on. Now, the process for filling these vacancies depends on the cause of the vacancy and whether a quorum of the remaining directors or trustees exists. So there are rules. These rules are, essential for the continuity of corporate governance. Kailangan ma-fill up yung vacancies. Now, let's look at the rules. Section 28. This governs the filling of vacancies in the board. This provides that if the vacancy arises other than by removal or expiration of term, it may be filled by a majority of the remaining directors or trustees, provided they still constitute a quorum. So dito sa first paragraph na to, who can fill the vacancy? Answer, it could be filled by the remaining directors or trustees. That's one viable way of filling vacancies, by the directors or trustees. Pero ang sinasabi ng batas, these remaining directors or trustees who will fill the vacancy must constitute a quorum kahit na merong vacancy, and the reason for the vacancy is not removal or expiration of term. So kung may namatay na director, that is one possible scenario. Now, if no quorum exists, yes, the ground for the vacancy or the reason for the vacancy is not removal or expiration. There are still remaining directors, but they do not constitute a quorum. What will happen? The vacancy must be filled by the stockholders or members in a regular or special election. So hindi na directors, hindi sila maka-constitute ng quorum, but it would be by the stockholders or members. Now, if the cause of the vacancy is expiration of term, okay, elections must be held not later than the day of the expiration. If the cause of the vacancy is removal, the election may be held on the same day as the removal meeting. So pagkatapos na may natanggal, automatic pwede na magkaroon ng election, provided that this is stated in the agenda of the meeting and there is notice. In emergencies, where the remaining directors cannot form a quorum, temporary appointments may be made from among the corporation's officers to address urgent matters. So only in emergency situations can there be an appointment of a director from the officers of the corporation, subject to strict limitations and notification to the SEC. So you see that there are distinctions for the vacancy. So vacancies may be caused by, number one, expiration of term, which must be filled by stockholders or members. Removal, and this again must be filled by stockholders or members. For all other causes like resignation, death, or incapacity, this must be filled by the remaining directors or trustees if they still constitute a quorum. Otherwise, if they do not constitute a quorum, then it will be the stockholders or members who will fill the vacancy. So in a nutshell, kung may vacancy, usually ang tanong dito, sino ang pwedeng mag-fill ng vacancy? Tingnan niyo lang muna yung cause of the vacancy. Expiration of term, removal, automatic, stockholders or members. All other causes, two possible scenarios. Directors or trustees can fill the vacancy for as long as they constitute a quorum. Another scenario, if the directors or trustees do not constitute a quorum, then stockholders or members will fill the vacancy. Okay, let's look at this hypothetical scenario. Okay, a corporation has a 7-member board. One director resigns. That's the cause of the vacancy, leaving only 3 directors. The bylaws require a quorum of 4 directors to conduct business. The stockholders are unable to convene a meeting due to lack of notice. Now, in this scenario, who has the authority to fill the vacancy and what steps should be taken? So, resignation of directors. Now, answer, it's true that stockholders have the primary authority to fill vacancies. However, if an emergency exists, the remaining directors may temporarily fill the vacancy by appointing an officer of the corporation subject to limitations and reporting requirements under the law. So tignan natin dito, tatlo na lang yung naiwan, di ba? The cause of the vacancy is resignation. That is a cause where directors may be allowed to fill the vacancy. But the remaining directors do not constitute a quorum. So, the answer is stockholders will fill the vacancy. Exception to the additional, if in case of emergency, kailangan ng magkaroon ng director para makapag-act ang corporation, then directors, even if they do not constitute a quorum, may temporarily fill the vacancy by appointing an officer of the corporation. Okay, let's look at more examples. The cause of the vacancy is resignation of a director. If a director resigns and the remaining directors still constitute a quorum, then board may elect. Okay? Diba dalawa lang yung grounds or causes na pwedeng na ang stockholders or members ang mag-fill ng vacancy. Expiration of term or removal. All other grounds, directors na ang mag-fill ng vacancy for as long as they still constitute a quorum. Resignation, that's a cause of vacancy where directors can fill the vacancy. Paano naman pag removal of a director? That caused the vacancy. Who can fill the vacancy? It would be the stockholders. Stockholders na yan. Now, can you think of an example of an emergency board appointment? Example, a corporation faces a critical financial decision, but the board lacks a quorum due to multiple resignations. Di na kailangan na ang stockholders ang mag-appoint or mag-elect ng director to fill the vacancy. Under emergency situations, the remaining directors, even if they do not constitute a quorum, can appoint an officer of the corporation, like in this example, a chief financial officer, as a temporary director to address the issue. So that's for vacancy. Duties, liability, and the dealings of directors. So in as much as directors are entrusted with the management of corporate affairs and are bound by fiduciary duties of obedience, diligence, and loyalty, they are liable for damages if they act in bad faith, gross negligence, or in conflict with their fiduciary duties. So, their dealings with the corporation are regulated to prevent conflicts of interest, thus ensuring fairness and transparency. So again, as far as directors are concerned, vis their role in corporate governance, they are bound by these duties. Duties of obedience, duty of diligence, duty of loyalty. Pag duty of obedience, directors must act within the purpose of the organization. Duty of diligence, directors must exercise diligence of a good father of a family in managing the corporation. Duty of loyalty, they must avoid conflict of interest and must always act in the best interest of the corporation. If directors violate these duties, then they will be liable for damages. As when, in Section 30, they willfully and knowingly vote for or assent to patently unlawful acts. If they also are guilty of gross negligence or bad faith in managing the corporation, and if they put their interest first, as when they acquire personal or pecuniary interests in conflict with their corporate duties. Liable for damages ang directors. Dealings with the corporation. These pertain to contracts involving directors, okay, with the corporation. These contracts are voidable unless, okay, these conditions are met. Namely, there is fairness in the contract. The contract is not reliant on the self-dealing director's vote for approval, and that there is full disclosure that the contract is dealing with the corporation. So voidable ang general rule sa mga contracts entered into by the directors with their own corporation, but these contracts may be, ratified if all these conditions are met. Valid pa rin yung contracts na to basta they are fair. The passage of these contracts are not conditioned upon the vote of the concerned director, and that there is full disclosure of the fact that this contract has something to do with dealing with the corporation itself, by the director dealing with the corporation itself. Some examples highlighting the duties of the director, if there are violations on these duties, Okay, so for duty of loyalty, a director who approves a contract between the corporation and another company they own, they must ensure that the contract is fair, reasonable, and disclosed to the board. So take note that there are two corporations, and this director in the first corporation is also a director in the other corporation. Now, for this contract to be valid, the contract between these two corporations with a common director must be fair, reasonable, and this fact must be disclosed to the board. Failure to comply with these conditions would mean that the contract is voidable. Liability for negligence in Phil Harbor Ferries and Port Services Incorporated versus Carlos. The court absolved a corporate officer of liability because there was no clear and convincing evidence of gross negligence or bad faith in approving expenditures. So from this example and jurisprudence, we could infer that to prove that there was a breach of duty on the part of a director, clear and convincing evidence is required. In example of conflict of interest, a director who acquires shares in a competing company without disclosure. Okay? So bumili siya sa competing company. So there is conflict of interest, may be held liable for breach of fiduciary duty of loyalty. Doctrine of centralized management. So briefly, this doctrine establishes that corporate powers are exercised through the board, and business is conducted and properties are controlled by the board of directors or trustees. So management is exercised by the board, thus creating a centralized decision-making structure that does not depend on ownership. So as we learned already, there's a difference between corporation and partnership, and one of the big differences that for corporation, ownership is different from management. So even if you are a shareholder in a corporation, it doesn't mean that you manage the corporation. Ownership is different from management. You can only manage the affairs of a corporation if you are elected as a director or a trustee. Corporate officer structure. The law mandates specific officer structure supporting centralized management. Ano ba yung officer structure and the RCC that supports the concept of centralized management? Under Section 24, after the board election, these officers must be elected. President, treasurer, secretary. And for corporations vested with public interest, the compliance officer must also be elected. Now, as far as one-person corporations are concerned, iba naman yung management structure niya, considering that it is composed only of a single stockholder. So ano na yung management structure ng one-person corporation? A single stockholder in this OPC serves as the sole director and president. Wala nang iba, siya na, director and president. However, he must appoint separate treasurer and corporate secretary within 15 days of incorporation. So a treasurer and secretary need not be a stockholder in an OPC. Now, can this single stockholder who is the director and president be the corporate secretary in an OPC? The answer is no. There is a prohibition. It cannot be the corporate secretary. And take note also, para may continuity of existence ang isang one-person corporation, there must be a nominee and an alternate nominee. So that if the single stockholder who is the sole director and president, okay, dies or becomes incapacitated, pwede siyang palitan nung nominee or nung alternate nominee. So that's the doctrine of centralized management. So the business is conducted, the powers of the corporation are exercised, the business is conducted, and the properties are controlled by the board of directors or trustees, creating centralized management decision making. Corollary to the doctrine of centralized management is the characteristic of a corporation where ownership is distinguished from management. Now let's talk about the business judgment rule. A business judgment rule under the code protects corporate directors and officers from liability for decisions made in good faith within their authority and in the best interest of the corporation. Put otherwise, if a director acted in good faith within his authority and sa tingin niya that is for the best interest of the corporation, but later on, yung decision niya proved otherwise, nagkamali siya, nagkaroon ng losses ang corporation, the director will not be held liable. So the only criterion so that a decision of the board may not be held against them to make them personally liable is that they acted in this fashion, in good faith, within their authority, and in the best interest of the corporation. Kahit na yung resulta is different from what they expected. And within this business judgment rule, yung board ang may authority to decide for the corporation. The courts cannot interfere with legitimate business decisions. So the court cannot, for example, nullify a business decision done in good faith for something that the judge sees more appropriate. Okay? Basta yung decision was done in good faith within their authority and at that particular time in the best interest of the corporation, kahit na nagkamali yung decision nila, then no one, not even the courts, can invalidate that decision or make the corporate directors and officers liable. Let's look at this corporate, this jurisprudential standards. Lorente versus Star City. 2020, the Supreme Court reiterated the principle that corporate actions and decisions are generally not subject to judicial review unless there is a clear showing of bad faith, fraud, or gross negligence. Business judgment rule. The same principle was applied in this case, National Sugar Trading Corporation versus CA. Courts cannot interfere in the internal management of corporations unless through clear and convincing evidence there is a showing of violation of law or public policy. Let's look at some examples. A corporation's board of directors decided to invest in a high-risk venture. Yan ang decision nila. Now, if the decision results in financial losses, the directors cannot be held personally liable as long as the decision was made in good faith, with due diligence, and in the corporation's best interest. So the rule protects corporate directors from liability for honest mistakes in judgment. Now, exception. If in that same example, the board of directors knowingly invests in a fraudulent scheme or fails to conduct due diligence resulting in significant losses, then that's the time that they could be held liable for breach of fiduciary duty. They are not protected under the business judgment rule. Doctrine of apparent authority. This doctrine allows a corporation to be bound by the acts of its officers or agents when such acts are within the scope of authority that the corporation has represented to third parties. Kahit na wala naman talagang actual authority yung mga officers or agents. So, as you can now see, this doctrine is based on estoppel, and it serves to protect third parties who rely in good faith on the representations of corporate agents. Some cases decided by the Supreme Court where the High Court upheld the doctrine of apparent authority. Philippine Race Horse Trainers Association Incorporated versus Pedras, okay, Negras Construction and Development Corporation, 2015, was held that a corporation may be stopped from denying the authority of its officers if it knowingly permits them to act within the scope of apparent authority or holds them out as possessing such authority. Even though there is really no board resolution allowing these persons to perform such acts for and in behalf of the corporation. What if there is inaction on the part of the corporation? Parang hinahayaan niya lang. In Ayala Land Incorporated versus ASB Realty Corporation, 2018, Court explained that apparent authority arises when a corporation, through its actions or silence, leads a reasonably prudent person to believe that an agent has authority to act on its behalf. So if a corporation allows or does nothing when someone acts for in its behalf, even if in actuality that person has no authority, it's not supported by a board resolution or a secretary's certificate, then that corporation is stopped, okay, from raising the defense of lack of authority as against a reasonably prudent man. Let's look at some concrete examples. First scenario, corporate officer acting beyond authority, but the corporation cannot use this as a defense. A corporate president enters into a contract without board approval. So wala siyang actual authority. If the corporation has previously allowed the president to execute similar contracts without objection, then this history of the corporation or the way the corporation conducts itself to the public and to people transacting with it, okay, this may be relied upon by third parties on the president's apparent authority. However, if this third party, okay, knows na walang authority yung president nila or he did not act in good faith, then the corporation may not be bound under the doctrine of apparent authority. Yung unauthorized real estate transactions, as in the case of Ayala Land Incorporated versus ASB Realty Corporation 2018, where the facts, sabi, Ramos Children signed a contract to sell on behalf of a corporation, but they do not have a board authority. Now, the court held that the doctrine of apparent authority did not apply because the corporation did not clothe the children with any indicia of authority. So, hindi nag-apply yung doctrine of apparent authority because there is no evidence whatsoever to show that the corporation indeed allowed or in silence tolerated the act of these people. Mortgage contracts by unauthorized officers, San Miguel Corporation versus Trinidad 2020, where the Supreme Court found that even if an agent exceeded their authority, the principal could still be bound under apparent authority if the principal knowingly permitted the act of the agent, okay, or had clothed the agent with authority. So, inaction or any action showing to third parties that the agent was authorized even if there is no written authorization to that effect, okay, is an example of is a situation where apparent authority may be applied. Then lastly, you have the doctrine of ratification or estoppel. This doctrine covers a situation where unauthorized acts of corporate officers, trustees, or officers may be validated or where parties are precluded from denying corporate authority. This is based on fairness and accountability in corporate dealings. Doctrine of ratification, this is under Section 30. Okay? Doctrine of ratification, Section 30 of the RCC. Directors, trustees, or officers who act without authority may bind the corporation if their acts are subsequently ratified. So yung mga unauthorized acts, take note magkaiba yung ultra vires act of decorporation from unauthorized act of the directors, trustees, or officers. So what we are talking about here in the doctrine of ratification are the unauthorized acts of directors, trustees, or officers. So, kailan nararatify yung isang unauthorized act ng director, trustees, or officers? Ratification occurs when the corporation through its board or stockholders voluntarily adopts or confirms the unauthorized act. And this could be done expressly or impliedly. Now, kung expressly, it's not difficult to understand that mag-i-issue ng subsequent board authorization or board ratification resolution ratifying the act. Pero paano naman yung implied ratification? Well, kung walang ginawa ang corporation or it does something indirectly acknowledging the authority of or acknowledging the validity of the act of this director, trustee, or officer, as when it accepts the benefits derived from the unauthorized act of directors, trustees, or officers, then you have an implied ratification. A doctrine of estoppel, Section 20 of the Code, which provides that individuals who act as a corporation without proper authority may be held liable as general partners. A doctrine of estoppel, well, as far as this kind of corporation is concerned. Okay, take note of these cases. Yasuma versus Heirs of the Villa, 2006. Salido Jr. versus Aramaywan Metals Development Corporation, 2021. In both, there were unauthorized acts committed by corporate officers. These unauthorized acts may be validated or ratified by the corporation. And to just wrap up the discussion on doctrine of ratification and estoppel, let's look at the simple examples. For doctrine of ratification, a corporate officer enters into a contract without a board approval. Okay, so unauthorized yan. If the board later accepts the benefits of the contract, like the payment of or delivery of goods, this constitutes implied ratification. Thus, the effect is the contract entered into by this officer who is unauthorized will now bind the corporation. Stoppel, I think this is an example for corporation by, let's look at this example. A corporation allows an individual to act as its representative in negotiations. If a third party relies on this representation and enters into a contract, the corporation may be stopped from denying the individual's authority, even if no formal authorization was given. So in this example, a corporation allowed an unauthorized individual to represent it in negotiation. So kung itong unauthorized representative entered into negotiations or contract with third parties, the corporation cannot free itself from any obligation in that contract by just saying that their representative was not authorized. So the corporation's act of allowing this individual, an authorized individual, is the basis for the application of doctrine of estoppel. Stop na yung corporation dyan. So we are done now with this topic. Mabigat na topic, directors, trustees, and officers.